What makes for a good story mode for a fighting game? For years, fighting games have been thought of as mainly multiplayer affairs, and while most multiplayer games slowly became focused mostly on online-only matches, fighting games do have their own unique niche in the sense that thanks to tournaments and sometimes just plain bad netcode, they have thrived as local multiplayer affairs. Well, in comparison to say first-person shooters, but even first-person shooters still deliver great single-player campaigns pretty much every year, while fighting games keep struggling to deliver in that front. That's not to say there is no good single-player content for fighting games, there is, and the older you look, the more unique they get, as in the good old days where it was expected from console games that you'd get at least some single-player use out of every game. Those days delivered some very unique story modes, but I don't think what a fighting game needs is a particularly unique gimmick for a story mode to work. Sometimes all you need to do is to just put what you already have in a new context, in the context of a story. Enter BlazBlue Calamity Trigger. Is the very first BlazBlue game, and it was my introduction to Arc System Works fighting games. Yes, I had never played Guilty Gear before I played BlazBlue, and I know it's a very solid fighting game, I have played it now, please crucify me later. That's not what I'm here to talk about. Instead, I want to talk about the story mode. I don't want to talk about all of the complex combos, of all of the crazy shit that you can put in the game. No, I want to talk about the story mode, because you see, BlazBlue is what we in the business call anime as fuck, and one thing that always caught my attention is why aren't there more anime style games that focus on one-on-one battles like so many shonen anime do? Why can't we get a story focused game with training arcs and stuff that culminates into half-hour-long battles that serves as climaxes to each arc? And BlazBlue does not do all of that, but it does use its battles in a very interesting way. The way Calamity Trigger's story mode works is that you pick a character just like in an arcade mode, but instead of a string of battles, you then instead get to play some mini visual novel segments in between climatic battles with other characters. During the VN parts, you get to pick choices that can change the plot and lead to different battles, and then once you're done, you can pick another character or try to reach a different ending all the way to the true ending of the game. I know all of that sounds rather basic, but actually there's a lot more here than you think, because you see, what are fighting games all about? Fighting, right? And Calamity Trigger decided to make something truly special here, because the actions you take during battles can actually serve as hidden choices for the visual novel segments. In order to access some branches of the visual novel, you will need to lose during certain battles. In order to access other branches, you need to finish a fight with a special. Sometimes you need to finish every single fight of a character with a special, which is then represented in the actual story as their powers or true nature or something like that. Sometimes it gets really weird, slowly consuming them. It's all very cool, and I'm surprised this is the only game that I know of that does this. The nature of the story itself also helps. It's not clear at first, but the story of Calamity Trigger takes place inside a time loop, so you're not playing through many non-canon stories to reach the canon one. Every story is technically sort of canon, and given the setting is extremely dense with lore and terminology, playing through each story can feel like slowly chipping away until you finally reach the reward at the core of the game, all while getting personally acquainted with every single character of the cast and their individual motivations and alliances. It kept me hooked the whole way through. Now, for better or for worse, Arc System Works only attempted to replicate the story mode in the sequel, Continuum Shift. The last two games of the BlazBlue quadrilogy, it's called a quadrilogy, right? Went for a much more straightforward visual novel style with hours-long segments of text before battle started. This was first seen in games made by ArcSys outside of the BlazBlue franchise at first, with Persona 4 Arena even having a character whose story only had one battle at the very end, one was mostly just a lot of text, It sorta made context at that point, but there was just too much damn text in that game. And then it was eventually brought to its logical conclusion with Guilty Gear Xrd, where the story mode is nothing but a visual novel with no fights at all. A AAA quality visual novel, but still just a visual novel. And I really wish they tried their hands one more time at something like BlazBlue, but alas. And that's it. That's my point. Fighting games try to spice up their single-player offerings in different ways, and the more interesting ones usually tend to be the ones that are really weird or try to tack on RPG elements or something, but to me the best one will forever be Calamity Trigger, because it incorporated story into the fighting itself, and because it had a pretty cool story to be propped up by this as well. So what are your favorite fighting game story modes? Like, no, seriously, I like fighting games, but I usually avoid multiplayer, so if you can just leave some recommendations, that would be just great. Also, just a reminder that every game mentioned in this video is available right now on PC, so do go take a look at them and come back with some impressions if you'd like. That's it for today. BlazBlue is really cool, you guys!
I am the White Void. I am the cold steel. I am the just sword. With blade in hand shall I reap the sins of this world and cleanse it in the fires of destruction. I am Hakumen. The end has come.